Hi guys, welcome back to another video. I realized that we are pretty much already halfway through the year. It's already mid-June when I'm filming this, probably later when I upload. So we're already halfway through the year. I'm more or less halfway through my reading goal, and I realized that maybe it's time to analyze my reading so far this year, because honestly it has been a little bit disappointing. I feel like I haven't had a lot of 5 stars, I haven't had a lot of new favorites, so I wanted to do a few videos maybe analyzing my reading this year and how maybe we can improve it in the second half, because I need more like amazing books. I need to read more 5-star books. I need to find new favorites, because so far it's been really not the best reading year for me, and I don't know why. I don't know what it is about it. Maybe I'm just picking up the wrong books, and I'm also reading a little bit less than in the previous years, but I want to improve my reading, so I'm trying to figure out maybe what I'm in the mood for and what I want to be reading next. But for this video, let's have a look at everything I've read so far this year and let's rank the books. So I've read 24 books so far this year, which is about halfway through my reading goal. My reading goal for this year is 50. So 24 out of 50, and we're not at the end of June yet. That feels pretty good. So I went through my Goodreads and I ranked all of the books that I've read. I have a list next to me, so if I'm looking there, that's where I'm looking. And I'm gonna show you all of the books in order from worst to my current favorite, and then we will see if at the end of the year the favorite is still the same book or if I found a new favorite in the second half. So let's start with the worst. Unfortunately, the worst book of the year I think is also the first book that I read. Maybe that set my reading year up for a really bad one, and that was Brutes by Diz Tate. Unfortunately, that book just wasn't for me. I really did not like this. This is kind of like a weird story set in like southern US where a girl goes missing and like the entire town is kind of figuring out what happened to her. It's told from a very weird perspective because it's told from the we perspective. So it's from a group of girls in this town and they always speak in like, we did this, we did that. And I did not like that. It meant that I wasn't really able to connect to any of the characters. It was just this weird collective that I had no connection to. I found it really boring, if I'm gonna be honest, and just not very exciting, and I felt very disconnected from it. I didn't really have a good time, and I was honestly just kind of waiting for it to be over. So I think I gave this 2 stars. Not my worst book I've ever read. Like, it's not a bad book by any means, it just wasn't for me personally. Like, I didn't find any enjoyment in it. The next book I read was honestly just a novella, and I feel like novellas always have a hard time comparing to like a full-length book, but that was Same Time Next Year by Tessa Bailey. It was fun. It was fine. It was a romance between a girl and I believe he's like an ice hockey player, and they had a marriage of convenience because he needed a green card to be able to stay in the US, and she gave him that. So yeah, that was the plot. It was honestly just very underdeveloped. It felt like that it was very insta-lovey. I didn't really feel a lot of chemistry between the characters, and there were so many time jumps that I felt like we were not spending any time with the couple. It was like, oh, we'll do a marriage of convenience, and then 6 months forward and now they're husband and wife, and it's just like it made very little sense to me. I got very little from that book. So unfortunately not my favorite. Also, don't read Tessa Bailey in public. I made the mistake, and I think I also skimmed through most of the sex scenes because of it, because I don't know, I was in public. So yeah. The next book on my list is The Kind Worth Saving by Peter Swanson. This is in spot 22. Unfortunately, this just didn't live up to the prequel. I felt like it was very much just copy-paste of the first book. Like, why was so much of the plot literally identical to the first book? I don't understand why Peter Swanson felt the need to write a sequel like 7 or 8 years after the first book was released. Like, I feel like he was probably just trying to like make some profit from the success of the first book and write a sequel, but like, be creative. Don't write the same book again. Don't write it over and over. Like, so much in this book was the same plot line from the first book, just recycled, and I was not in a good way. It was very boring. I felt no connection to the characters whatsoever. I didn't really like it. It wasn't thrilling. I feel like a lot of what I loved about the first book and why I rave about The Kind Worth Killing is because it was so unpredictable and so exciting. But in this one, I just felt like all the thrill, all the excitement was gone. The ending was very anticlimactic. Like, I didn't feel like there was a grand reveal at all. So it honestly just gave me nothing. And if you've read The Kind Worth Killing, which I would still recommend, don't bother buying this. Like, don't bother picking up the sequel because it's not like worth it at all unless you want to read a copy-paste story of The Kind Worth Killing that is significantly worse. The next book that I read was another short story, and that was The Lover by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I picked this up because I wanted something very quick, very short, and this is kind of like a fairy tale about a girl who lives in like a small village near the woods, and she wants to fall in love very badly, and I think she falls in love with this thief who also turned out to be kind of a wolf. Honestly, I have very little memory of it because it was just so short. I think it's like 50 pages, but it was entertaining. It wasn't anything super special. I think I gave it like 3 stars. It was good, it was fine, but it just did not have enough time to be really memorable. The next book on my rating in spot 20 is The Happy Couple by Nersha Dolan. This is a literary fiction that I picked up a couple of months ago, or maybe last month, I don't remember. I think last month. And it's about a couple who are in significant turmoil. Like, they are just not working out. Like, they have so many struggles, so many problems. And I think he is cheating on her. She kind of suspects it, but forgives him. And it's just a couple that is very much not working out, but they're not really realizing or recognizing that they're not happy together. And it was fine, it was fun, it was entertaining, but just not a favorite. I feel like a lot of the POVs were a bit unnecessary. I feel like if this book was more written from like one perspective, I would have enjoyed it more, but just the different POVs were not always my favorite. And it also just felt, you know, a little bit bland. I feel like there wasn't that much going on. But overall, an entertaining book that I would recommend if you're into literary fiction. It didn't do it for me because I'm also, it takes a lot for a literary fiction to really become a favorite for me. A lot of the times I find them just a little bit boring because they are so slice of life. But this one was fine, it was entertaining, it was a really nice book to read in between, but not an all-time favorite. After that, I have ranked Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. This is the second book in the Magnolia Parks universe, and I think so far from the ones I've read, this is probably the worst one. I just felt that because this covers the same timeline as Magnolia Parks, like the set in the same time span, I felt a bit bored by this, and also Daisy is not my favorite character. Daisy is really much like a girl who only hangs out with guys. She's really not a girl's girl. She's the opposite of a girl's girl. She's a girl hater. And I don't like that vibe. I'm so sorry, Daisy, but you are my probably least favorite character in the universe. I got warmed up to her in the second Daisy Hates book, but in the first one, I was so frustrated at her. I felt like she kept making the wrong decisions, kept treating people badly, and I was like, Daisy, come on, be more of a girl's girl, like, have some morals. I don't know, just my least favorite in the series, but overall, I really enjoyed the series, so yeah, but this ranks the lowest for me. In spot 18, yes, 18, we have Good Material by Dolly Alderton. This was shocking for me that this wasn't a favorite because I love everything that Dolly Alderton writes, and I had predicted this to be like 4 or 5 stars, and it just wasn't it. I think I give this 3 stars. I just didn't like it. I think Dolly Alderton writes a lot better from the perspective of a woman, or at least more enjoyable, because she wrote a man's perspective well, but I just don't think I like reading from a man's perspective. This book is just about a guy who is miserable. His girlfriend broke up with him after like a really long relationship, and he has a career as a comedian, but he's a failing comedian, like he's not good. He doesn't make enough money to pay rent, so he's struggling to find somewhere to live. his friends are really shit, his whole situation's shit, and he's just not doing anything about it. Like, he is just wallowing. 90% of this book is this man just feeling sorry for himself and not fixing anything about his life. And I was there like, you just had a breakup, like, use it for comedy material, or like, do something about your life. Like, try write new material, or try to, I don't know, change your life. Like, don't just feel sorry for yourself. But he really just did that, and I didn't like it. And I feel like, as good as Dolly Alderton's books are usually in terms of like life lessons, I felt like I wasn't really gaining a lot of life lessons from this one, except like, don't act like this. But in terms of Dolly Alderton's books, this is definitely my least favorite of hers. I've read all her books so far, and this one was just the one I enjoyed the least. Unfortunately, I don't know, maybe other people can, like, if you liked this, let me know why, because I'm struggling to see anything good to say about it. I'm so sorry, Dolly Alderton. I love your work, and Ghost is one of my favorite books of all time, but this one is not. Next, in number 16, we have Cross the Line, which is the book I read most recently. I actually finished this last night, and it was so hard to rank this because I actually really enjoyed this. Like, we're now getting into good book material. Like, this was a 4-star for me, a low 4-star, but still a 4-star. So I think I just read a lot of midfield books, because if number 17 is already a 4-star, then, you know, I think I just read a lot of 4-star books. This is a Formula One romance, it's not hard to tell, about a driver and his best friend's sister. So yeah, so this is like a brother's best friend trope. She needs a job very desperately, and he has just ruined his like social media reputation. Like, he just has the worst reputation alive, and she works in like marketing and media, and so he offers her the job to fix his reputation and to do like his social media. So she travels with him to all the Formula One races, and obviously there is a spark all along, and they both had a crush on each other, but they didn't want to act on it because her brother was really against it. He didn't want anything to happen between like his best friend and his sister. Valid. But yeah, there was obviously a spark, and they were like, no, we can't do it. But obviously, you know, obviously they're gonna act on it. So this was honestly really entertaining. It was really fun. However, the reason it didn't get a higher rating is because it really did just feel like F1 fanfiction. It felt very, very, very obvious who the drivers and the teams and everything was based on. So obviously they were all fictional. Like, none of the drivers are real, none of the teams are real, but it was so clearly obvious who they were based on, and that just made it feel kind of like fan fiction. I feel like it would have been better if Simone Sultani had like invented her own teams, her own drivers, and given them like their own characters, instead of just modeling the teams like one-to-one on the real teams. Yeah, otherwise this was fun, that was entertaining. Nothing too original. I feel like a brother's best friend trope is always the same. It's always like, no, we can't date because my brother is against it. Like, he said that we shouldn't. And I just feel like that is a little bit overdone. We've seen it like a million times, but it does always hit the spot in a way. Like, it's never bad, it's always good, but it's very difficult to become a favorite when it's not really unique, if you get what I mean. Next, we have yet another romance, this time Check-in-Mate by Ali Hazelwood. This is a chess player romance, and honestly, it was good. This was really, really fun. It is YA, so the characters are a bit younger. I think they're just about 18, and they are both chess players competing in like professional tournaments, and he is like the champion, like the best of the best. And she, the female main character, took some time out from playing chess professionally, so she wasn't doing competitions, and then she has to fill in like last minute for one competition. She plays against him, the champion, and she beats him, and that throws her back into this world of professional chess playing and like competing in these tournaments, and it's really fun. It's really giving The Queen's Gambit just a bit more like YA 21st century vibes. So if you liked The Queen's Gambit, this is definitely a romance for you. And I really loved the male main character here. I think he was such a good guy. And a lot of time in romances, I feel like authors don't write good guys a lot, and he was really like a sweetie. Like, he is a guy I would 100% want to date, and I really love that. So yeah, that was good. I don't know why it's only in spot 16, but it was fun, it was entertaining, I had a good time. The next book is yet another romance. I've read a lot of like 4-star romances, and that was Business or Pleasure by Rachel and Solomon. This is, yeah, a romance between a ghostwriter and the actor that she's writing like a memoir for. So she goes to travel with him to all of his like conventions and photo shoots and everything he has to do in his acting career, and she writes his book. But at the same time, she also gives him sex lessons because he is quite terrible at sex, and she's like the first person to openly say that to him, and he's like, how do I improve? Teach me. Give me lessons on how to be better, because otherwise I'm never getting a girl. And obviously you can't really have sex all the time without getting attached, so there is some romance developing, and this was so fun. This was really entertaining. If you're still looking for like a summer romance, summery vibe, just really fun, very silly, very goofy, this is it. The next book I have ranked in spot 14 is Utopia Avenue by David Mitchell. This is another 4-star read for me. This is kind of like Daisy Jones and the Six in the vibe. It's about a fictional rock band in the 1960s in London. They are formed by this manager who has a vision. Like, he selects all of these individual musicians from different genres, different like career paths, and he puts them together in a band called Utopia Avenue, and he is determined to make them one of the biggest acts in the world. And it's kind of about their like rise and fall, how they started out, had their kind of really tough path to success, how they got famous, how they recorded their albums, their individual struggles, because all of these come from really different backgrounds, really different family situations, and we follow them all and their struggles and their paths. I liked this. I liked it a lot. I predicted this to be a 5-star read. It wasn't a 5-star read for me, unfortunately. It was like 4 stars. The reason is because it delved weirdly into the supernatural at some point. There was like one character storyline that was weirdly random and supernatural, and like wouldn't have minded that if I had gone into it expecting it, but I was not expecting this historical fiction about a rock band in the 60s to become supernatural. Why were we suddenly in like parallel dimensions? I don't know. I didn't vibe with it, and honestly, whenever that plot like came up, whenever that character's POV came up, I was just kind of wanting it to be over, and I feel like it, yeah, 4 stars max, because just, I don't know, I was just, everything else really resonated with me and I really liked it, but that one character storyline just sort of ruined it for me. I'm so sorry. If you want more in-depth thoughts about my experience, I did a reading vlog on this when I was in France. So if you want more in-depth thoughts and like, yeah, me reading this, then you can watch that video. We have another Magnolia Parks book. We have Daisy Hates The Great Undoing in 13th. This is the sequel to Daisy Hates and the 3rd book overall in the Magnolia Parks series, and this was good. I really liked the plot of this and like where the story went. I feel like by the time that I read this is the 4th in the series, I was invested. Like, I was invested in all the characters. I really liked Julian in here, Christian, my all-time favorite. So I really liked the men in here. Again, still not a fan of Daisy. Daisy just is not my favorite character, but I feel like the male POVs in this really saved it. Like, Julian and Christian carried this book. And then in 12th, we have Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home. This is the 3rd book in the Magnolia Parks universe, and I put them very close to each other because honestly, from the plot, I cannot distinguish like much difference. Like, they're so similar in what happens because they also kind of cover the same timeline that I can't really separate them a lot. So they're just going in 13th and 12th and like not that much difference, but this is about Magnolia and BJ mainly, and kind of We find out a lot more about their backstory in this, which explains a lot of their kind of like trauma bonding. Because in the first book, it's like, why are these characters treating each other so shitty, but like they can't get away from each other? I get it now. Like, this book brought a lot of perspective and a lot of backstory that really helped to understand why these characters are as fucked up as they are. And it was good. I like this storyline a lot, and I really just love the universe. It's so trashy, it's so dramatic, like it's so easy to read, it's so bingeable, and I love that about Magnolia Parks. In number 10, we have started the top 10, damn. In number 10, we have Rouge by Mona Awad. This is another, are we already in the 4.5? I think we're now reaching the 4.5 stars. And this is a literary fiction about the beauty industry. It's kind of also horror, although I don't know, I don't want to call it a horror because it's weird. It's weird fiction. It's a little bit horrifying, but it's not like scary. It's about a woman whose mother dies, and she goes back to her hometown and her like childhood home to sort out her mother's belongings, and she finds all these beauty items and stuff from like a treatment place, like a treatment center, and she gets an invitation to go there and get a free treatment, and she gets wrapped up in this world of weird treatments that might not be just superficial but might delve deeper into your psyche. And she gets wrapped up in this ideal of beauty standards and the world of treatments and wanting to look prettier every single day and changing your entire self for your beauty. And yeah, this was really cool, really memorable. Like, I really felt like this book really imprinted on me and like it left an impression. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. In 9th place, we have the final book that is missing from the Magnolia Parks universe, namely the first one, Magnolia Parks. It's still my favorite from the series. I think that I just enjoyed this the most because it was my first introduction to all the characters. It was me getting to know everyone, and I just really had a good time reading this. Like, it started out so silly, but I also reread this. This was my second time reading this year, and I just had a good time. I just had fun. Like, this is so silly, this is so bingeable. You can pretty much read this in a day, although it's like quite long actually, but it's so easy to read, it's so bingeable, and it's so gossipy. Like, it's so dramatic and silly and fun. So yeah, I like this. This is kind of before it gets super like dramatic. Like in Daisy Hates, it's a lot of like mafia and the mob and gangs and everything. This is still a little bit more tame, so I feel like I enjoyed this because it felt like the slightest bit more realistic. Not that it's ever really realistic, but you get what I mean. In the next two spots, we have Hunting Prince Dracula and Escaping from Houdini by Kerry Maniscalco. These are the second and third book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, and I am slowly reading this series this year, and I'm really enjoying these books. I had such a fun time reading these. Like, I had such a good time. I'm really loving the characters of Audrey Rose and Thomas and the kind of like storylines they're going to. I quite love a historical book, so reading about like Romania and Prince Dracula was really fun. And also in this one, they're on like a boat with like this traveling circus who are doing like shows every night. That was so entertaining. It was so fun to read. I really enjoyed this. So yeah, I would highly recommend these. There's not much to say about them individually except that they're a really fun time. They're really well written, and for YA books, because these are considered YA, they're quite scary. Like, they are quite dark and quite brutal. There's so much blood in these. Like, there's so many deaths. I was not prepared. And I'm kind of glad I'm reading them as an adult because I feel, you know, I feel a lot better about these things and it's less horrifying to read them. But yeah, I would really recommend these. So if you're still looking for like a series to binge this year, the Stalking Jack the Ripper books are really fun. Next on my list in 7th, we have Dear Dolly by Dolly Alderton. This is actually a really short book. It's a compilation of her newspaper column in the Sunday Times style, where she gives like big sister advice, kind of. So it's her advice column where she answers questions from readers that they sent in. And it's structured into different sections like relationship, career, what else do we have? Dating, friendship, relationship, family, sex, breakup and exes, body and soul, and so on and so forth. So it's very, very, very fun to read because it's a lot of life lessons and it's a lot of advice. And what I said, what I was missing from good material by Dolly Alderton, I got in this one because it felt like the big sister advice that I wanted. It's such a beautiful, beautiful book. Dolly Alderton is such a girl's girl, which I think in today's society is so important. She always prioritizes like being kind, being a good person, having good values, and that's what I appreciate about her and her writing so much, is that it's so positive and uplifting and just the best life lessons. I love Dolly Alderton, and this one is so high up my ranking because I loved it so much. In number 6, we have Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was amazing. This was so good and so entertaining. It's a thriller, kind of a horror, about a sound engineer, I think. She's like a sound editor. That is the title. She's a sound editor for like a film studio. Her best friend is an actor, and they stumble upon like an unfinished film that they want to finish, but that film is haunted. It has a lot of creepy stuff attached to it. It has a curse on it, and they want to break the curse, but in the process of breaking it, maybe they're unleashing something worse. They might have unleashed something a lot worse. So this was so horrifying. This was so scary. I think Silvia Moreno Garcia is amazing at writing horror that really haunts you and chills you to the bone. This was so good. I would highly recommend this. If you're still looking for an actually horrifying book, an actually scary book that will really, really, really make you unable to sleep at night, this is the way to go. In number 5, we have The No-Show by Beth O'Leary. Can you even see this? Kind of. This is a romance about 3 women who are all stood up by the same guy on Valentine's Day. And they're all like, this is fucking unbelievable. And it's this story about these 3 women who are all dating the same guy. And how they're all kind of like finding him super weird, and like, he's definitely hiding something. He is hiding something. And I spent the entire book trying to figure out what it was. I did not really know until the end. Like, the grand reveal was really great. I love Beth O'Leary's romances because they're so unique and they're not the standard romance. Everything I said about the other romances, that they're just a little bit like typical tropes. So we always have a typical trope, the trope is fulfilled, there's nothing unique about them. Beth O'Leary writes the most unique romances, and I love her for that. It was just so good. It was so unique. It felt really, really like the characters were all so fleshed out, and they had such personalities. They were such unique people, and it felt just like something I'd never read before, and I liked it. And the ending was unpredictable, which again, in a lot of romances, I feel like the endings are just really, really, really foreseeable and really predictable. This one had a really unpredictable ending because obviously since he's dating 3 women, you kind of don't really know how it's going to end, and like who is going to get the guy, if any of them are going to get the guy, if they all decide to ditch him, like, so it was really just, yeah, a really fun one, and I like that. We are down to the top 4, and in number 4 we have Foxglove by Adeline Grace. This is the sequel to Belladonna, and I am surprised to see this rank so highly. I did not expect it, but this was really good. This is a fantasy about a girl named Signa, and Signa has a connection to death. So she can see death, and she can kind of communicate with him, and she also is unable to die. Like, she just cannot die. And in the first book we kind of follow her as she moves in with a cousin of hers, because all of her family members around her seem to constantly pass away, and her cousin is really sick. So she is trying to do everything in her power to save her cousin from dying, to stop this horrifying spell that all of her family members that she stays with seem to pass away. And in the sequel we are once again following like kind of like a murder trial. So in the beginning of the book, someone really important dies, and Signa's uncle, I think he's her uncle, so her cousin's dad, is suspected to have poisoned this person. And so he is put behind bars, and Signa and her cousin are responsible for saving him because they believe he did not do it. So they need to find the culprit. They need to find out who really poisoned this man so they can free the uncle. It was really good. It's kind of like a thriller inside of a fantasy because they're really trying to solve this murder case, and it was just so good. I love the atmosphere that Adeline Grace creates. I feel like the world is so visual and so well fleshed out. It really feels like an entire world was created, and this is so good. And I believe the third book might already be out, or maybe it is coming out soon, but I'm excited to read that for sure. We are down to the top 3 books, and in third place we actually have a reread, a bit anticlimactic, but we have Penance by Eliza Clark. This was my favorite book of last year, my favorite book of 2023, and it still slaps. It's still so good. I still love this book so much. This is kind of Eliza Clark's take on true crime. In this book we follow an author who wrote a book about this true crime case. It's obviously fictional, but in the book we're pretending that it's real. And he wrote a book about a true crime case where a girl was murdered by some classmates of her. And he delves into the story, he writes an entire book about it. But after the book comes out, critics say that he invented a lot of the stuff in it and that he really changed the story. And also people that he interviewed for the book said that their interviews were severely misconstructed and do not represent the truth of what they actually said. So it's an entire story that kind of deals with what is allowed in true crime. Is true crime good? Is it bad? What damage does it do to the case and so on? And it's just really good. It also delves into stories like glamorizing serial killers, romanticizing serial killers, how growing up on the internet can really like shape you. And I feel like it was so well done. It was so good. And upon my reread, I actually annotated a lot of it, and I found so many details that I didn't really notice on my first read, and they make the experience just even better. So I'm still obsessed with this book, and I will rave about it forever. In second, we have Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is a fantasy that was extremely hyped last year. Everyone loved this in 2023. I only got around to reading it in January, but I really enjoyed it. This is so well done. It's a fantasy in a like fictional world where there are these gods, and there is this war of gods happening, and we follow our 2 main characters who are both kind of reporters. They both work at a newspaper, and they are kind of competing for the same job. And in this book they are both sent to the front lines of the war to be war reporters, and they're also corresponding in secret with each other, which they don't know it's each other. They have these magical typewriters and they send letters to someone and they don't know who it is, but it turns out to be them, and it's really cute. I did a horrible job describing this, but if you're on BookTube you already know what this is about because everyone talks about it, but I loved it. I need to read the sequel so badly, but yeah, this was one of the few 5 stars of the year. And last but not least, in number 1 we have my current favorite book of the year. Obviously this might change, maybe in the second half I'll find a book that I love even more, but for now my favorite book is Notes on Heartbreak by Annie Lord. This was so fun. I have a reading vlog where I documented reading this, and I had such an incredible time. This is such a beautiful story. I believe it's non-fiction about Annie Lord's actual like heartbreak, and she details her entire healing journey, like from the moment of the breakup to months and years later, and kind of everything that happened in between. She goes through so many stages of grief and like coping and healing, and it's so beautiful because it details so well all of the thoughts and realizations you have after a breakup, and everything that you kind of subconsciously do, that you think about, that you go through, like seeing all your friends happy, like being the only one that is suddenly pulled out of your safe cycle and your life that you've lived so far, and having to really realize everything is changing for you. And I took so many notes on this, like I have so many highlights and quotes because so much like wisdom was in this. It's kind of similar to Dear Dolly, but more in a coherent story. But I just loved the life lessons in it, and I think I learned so much from this book, and it resonated with me so hard. It was so good. Like there are so many beautiful quotes in this. It's so beautiful. I'm going through the quotes right now and I'm just realizing how lovely this book was and how much I loved it. Oh my god, I'm just obsessed with this book. I love it. I will always recommend this. I really need to get a physical copy of it actually, because I want to have this on my shelf and I want to be able to give it to my friends because it's so good. And I think every woman in their 20s who had a heartbreak, if the guy you dated at 19 broke your heart, just like, yeah, it happened to me, this is the book to read. Like this is what you should be picking up because it's so freaking good and I loved this. So yeah, Notes on Heartbreak by Annie Lord takes the current #1. Okay, final tally is I only had 3 5 stars this year so far. Those were Penance, Divine Rivals, and Notes on Heartbreak. My brain just failed me. So we've only had 3 5 stars so far this year and I want more. So I'm gonna try in the second half of the year to pick up a lot of my like predicted 5 stars. Sometimes I put off reading those because I want to save them, but I feel ready. I need more 5 stars. So if you have books that you think I would like, maybe based on the ones I've showed you today, if you have books that you think I could love, let me know in the comments. Tell me what to read because I will be needing some book recommendations for the second half of the year. But for now, this is everything I read this year. Honestly, a very mixed reading year. We've had very few bad books. I feel like I've only read like 2 or 3 books that I really didn't like, but very few favorites and then a lot in between. We had a really large midfield of like 4-star books. So hopefully we can do a bit better in the second half of the year, but we'll see. For now, thank you for watching and I will see you very soon with a new video. Maybe I'll do the mid-year book freakout tag as well to get some more information on how I felt about the book so far this year. But see you then. Bye bye.